So I just wanted to make a quick video talking about lead poisoning and lead exposure. About a week ago, I got my blood lead level test results back, and it was, to me, an astonishing 18.3 micrograms per deciliter. So the reference for elevated blood lead levels is 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. So I'm at about 5 times that amount. Now, because of the sheer volume of rounds that I shoot, I fully expected my blood lead levels to be elevated, somewhere around 10 micrograms, but in reality it was double that. So that's obviously triggered me to take this a little bit more seriously. So the biggest message I want to convey with this video is if you shoot or are just around firearms a lot, you should go get your blood lead levels tested as soon as possible. If you're even mildly concerned or just curious what your blood lead levels are because you're into shooting, go and get it checked. There's really no reason not to get it checked and just know where you're at to establish a baseline now, and maybe you can see where you're at as you get it retested in the future as you go on in your shooting career. And I want to emphasize to go get tested because I don't want my mistake to be your mistake. What happened with me was almost a year ago when I went to the VA for my yearly checkup, I expressed concern to my doctor that I thought I should get my blood tested for lead. I told her, hey, I shoot a lot, I shoot competitively, I reload and so on. Last year I shot somewhere around 20,000 rounds, so just that alone would lead me to think that my levels would be elevated. Now, I don't think she understood the main mechanisms by which lead gets in your system from shooting, and frankly, I didn't either at the time. Typical doctor attitude, of course, she acted like she knew everything, so she basically made me feel dumb for even expressing concern about lead exposure. She started asking condescending questions like, well, you're not going shooting and then going to eat without washing your hands afterwards, right? You're not, touching the bullets and then eating a sandwich right after, right? Those I'm the smartest person in the room type of rhetorical questions. Now, up to that point, I was under the impression that basically the biggest thing when it comes to keeping lead out of your body when shooting was just washing your hands before putting anything in your mouth. So her comments kind of made sense to me at the time. Of course, I wasn't a fan of her attitude or the fact that she's like a dead ringer for Skylar White, but I figured she was right. So we did not order a blood lead level test then. It wasn't until recently that I was reading a Facebook post in a group that I'm in that was essentially an open discussion about everyone's experience with lead exposure. It wasn't until then that I came to understand that for the amount of shooting that I do and the amount of shooting that I will do in my lifetime, that I should absolutely take it seriously and get it tested no matter what the doctor says. So I ordered a blood lead level test without any input from my doctor, and it came back at that 18.3. Now, I'm sure you can imagine my frustration towards my doctor because now I'm wondering how long my levels have been elevated. Was it higher at any point? Was it lower? And now that's almost a year wasted that I could have been taking this more seriously to reduce my lead exposure. So even though they think they're the smartest people in the universe, I don't expect most doctors to really offer any sort of expert advice, in particular when it comes to lead exposure and shooting. Really the best people to ask about this, who have far greater expertise in the subject than most any doctor out there, are those from the shooting community who have had elevated blood lead levels or have managed to avoid having elevated blood lead levels despite them being serious shooters who put down some serious volume of fire. And having asked for advice and personal stories from shooters in my particular shooting community, I've come up with a list of things that I should be doing to help lower my lead levels and reduce my lead exposure. So the number one thing is going to be avoiding indoor ranges. 99% of my shooting has been and is outdoor, but in the last year or so, I have been spending at least a quarter of my time shooting at sort of an indoor-outdoor range. The firing line is essentially a shooting shack that's covered, and it shoots onto covered targets with an open air gap in between. So for all intents and purposes, this should be treated like an indoor range and has much poorer ventilation than a truly outdoor shooting range. So I suspect that shooting less at that range will help limit my lead exposure. Number two is I'm going to be much more conscious of where the gun smoke is going and using jacketed bullets indoors if I can help it. Like I said, it wasn't until I got my blood lead levels tested and I started researching this that I realized how much lead is actually in the gun smoke itself. Before, I paid no attention to where the gun smoke was going. I even liked the smell of it, but now I'm much more conscious of it and trying to avoid it if I can. If I can't avoid it, I'm going to use a respirator when shooting indoors or shooting with the wind towards me. Also, lead bullets are a huge source of lead in the air, especially compared to jacketed bullets. This is something that actually surprised me because I always understood that there was a lead compound in the primers, which was the main source of that lead in the air, and the fact that there's also an exposed lead portion on the back of most jacketed bullets. So it didn't really make sense to me that lead bullets produced more lead in the air. But if we take a look at this test conducted back in 1977, they tested jacketed bullets against lead bullets out of a Smith & Wesson Model 10, and they found that the lead bullet produced over 10 times as much lead in the air. So this kind of sucks for me because I just found a super great, super accurate, super soft shooting lead semi-wad cutter load, and I just bought a mold to start casting my own bullets. So I still plan to shoot lead and shoot a lot of it, but I'm just gonna have to be a little bit more mindful of the Gunsmoke and wear a respirator if I shoot lead indoors. I purchased some 3M N95 respirators that I'm going to use when I shoot indoors from now on. 3M, of course, makes great PPE. Number 3 is doing a better job of de-leading myself and the stuff that I interact with. So I've read some people will like strip down naked from the range in their garage before going into their house and stuff like that, but I'm not gonna do all that. I do make sure to take off my boots before entering the house proper, but unless you're really getting covered in like dust from sweeping all day at an indoor range or something like that, I just don't think stripping down your skivvies before entering your house is really necessary. I mean, maybe it is. I'm the guy with, elevated blood lead levels after all. So you listen to me or not listen to me, your call, but you probably should change out of your range clothes at some point when you get home. I just don't know if the stripping down in your garage thing is necessary. The main thing that I'm doing now is I bought pretty much every single de-lead product I could on Amazon, and I'm de-leading everything. I mean, I got the regular hand soap, I got the abrasive hand soap, I got the premium body wash, I got the shampoo, the laundry detergent, got the de-lead wipes, and basically went through and de-leaded everything. This is one of those things where I didn't really think about all the ways I could be exposing myself to lead until after finding out my levels were elevated. But after you find out, your stuff's messed up, you start playing the tape back in your head, and I'm thinking about, the door latches on my car, my steering wheel, my phone, and so on. And every time I've touched those surfaces without washing my hands after the range, and then every time I've touched those surfaces, and then like had a snack while I was driving or something, and usually I use like regular soap and water, regular baby wipes to clean this stuff down, but apparently that just doesn't do as good of a job at removing heavy metals as the de-lead stuff does. I don't know, it's chemistry or something. So I will leave some Amazon links to those de-lead products in the description. I wouldn't buy anything except the refill quantities. The small quantities are just much more expensive, and you can take the money that you save and just buy some cheap soap dispensers. Number 4 is going to be no more Monster on the firing line. If you've ever shot with me in competition, you'd probably know I'm never far from an open can of Monster. It sits right there on the firing line next to my ammo, and I sip on it when I can. This is apparently really, really bad. So I'm going to not do that anymore. Basically what's happening is that lead dust and aerosolized lead is getting on the can, on the rim of the can, and potentially in the can itself. And then of course I'm drinking that. So from now on, that Monster is going to go into a Nalgene bottle, and I will unscrew it and sip on it that way. Also related, I'm probably not going to smoke in the middle of a 270 shot match anymore. Usually you get a little break between 90 shot matches, and I would just, light up a cigarette and not really think about it. But if you think about it, there's probably lead and stuff all over my hands. I'm putting that up to my face. So if I am going to do anything like that, I'll just make sure to thoroughly clean my hands with those de-lead wipes before I do that. Number 5 is doing a better job at washing my hands. So, I'm constantly dry firing. I constantly have a pistol in my hands or taken apart while I'm at my desk or whatever. So I'm just going to do a better job of washing my hands anytime I touch my guns or ammo. And now that I have that de-lead soap, I should be able to do a better job of getting any of that stuff off of my hands after cleaning or working on my guns, especially after reloading. I'm touching lead bullets and stuff when I'm reloading. And again, apparently regular hand soap or dish soap doesn't do as good a job of floating those heavy metals away. So that's why the de-lead soap is better for that sort of thing, especially the soap with the, the abrasive stuff in it. That kind of helps clean the stuff that gets deep in your pores and in your fingerprints and stuff. Another thing is, and apparently this is a big one, is to wet tumble your brass. Now I've pretty much always wet tumbled my brass, but I want to talk about this anyways, because apparently the amount of lead dust and particles that gets into the air and into the dry tumbling media and thus into your lungs from dry tumbling brass is pretty immense. And several people whom I've talked to, they've noted significant drops in their blood lead levels just from switching to wet tumbling alone. The same thing goes for sweeping brass at an indoor range with a broom. That's just stirring up tons and tons of lead into the air, not just from the fresh brass, but just from the layer of lead dust that builds up on everything in indoor ranges. That stuff gets on you, on your clothes, on your face, and of course into your lungs. And again, this doesn't apply to me, but if you have kids, I would recommend not bringing your children to an indoor range unless you're very strict with them when it comes to hygiene before, during, and after shooting. I wouldn't have them, crawling around on the floor of an indoor range picking up brass, for example. And in the case of infants, I just wouldn't bring them anywhere near the firing line at an indoor range, or any range for that matter. If you are someone that shoots and has kids, it absolutely wouldn't hurt to be getting your kids' lead levels checked as well as your own. Kids are much more susceptible to the ailments that are associated with high elevated blood lead levels. So I think that pretty much covers my plan right now. I'll be interested to see how my levels are in a few months. Don't let my mistakes be your mistakes. If you shoot a good amount, or if you're just simply handling firearms a lot, if you have any concern whatsoever about lead exposure, especially if you're younger, go and get your blood lead levels tested. Don't let some fucking doctor tell you that you're fine and don't need to worry about it, only to find out almost a year later that your levels are 5 times the national standard. So thank you again to my channel members for directly supporting my channel. This is kind of a different video I just wanted to make and get the word out to people. Also, check out Michael Scott Earl's books in the pinned comment and description. You can get the first book in his sci-fi adventure series called Star Justice for free in an ebook format. Thank you for watching and have a great day.